Okay, folks, we'll go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Andrea Padilla, and I am the events manager here at Alertus Technologies. I will be your moderator for today. During this webinar, we will be discussing how to identify your emergency notification system roles and responsibilities to help you manage your emergency notification system program. Our session today will begin from 1 p.m. to 2, and we'll start with an in-depth presentation followed by a live Q&A session where you will have the opportunity to engage with our speaker to go over any questions or comments that are submitted during and after the webinar. This webinar is being recorded and will be shared with you after today's session. If you have any questions following this presentation, please email us at events@alertus.com. Now, I would like to introduce you to our speaker for today, Gil Savlodaver. He is the Director of Professional Services here at Alertus. His role helps Alertus customers develop and/or enhance their emergency management programs. Now, with further ado, Gil Savlodaver.
Thank you, Andrea. And I want to welcome all of you back to the 8th installment of the Emergency Management Forums webinar series. And today we're going to be taking a closer look at identifying all of the potential roles and the associated responsibilities involved in successfully managing your emergency notification system program. But first, just to provide you with a quick recap from our last meeting, we focused on the importance and we discussed all the benefits of beginning your emergency planning process, focusing on policy level considerations. And I presented and I walked you through the elements of the policy and governance template and outline all the potential goals and the program scope that you could use to develop your program. And then we reviewed the 10 policy questions that will help you start a dialogue with your internal stakeholders. And I also share with you my personal experience going through this policy development exercise when I worked as the alert and warning coordinator for the Ventura County Sheriff's Office. And I explained to you how I engage with our Ventura County public safety stakeholders. And I can't stress how valuable and essential this was in helping me develop Ventura County's program and plan. And now in today's webinar, we're going to move on to the second part of the policy and governance development process. And we are going to be discussing in greater detail the activity of what I call role sorting, which is identifying the roles and the responsibilities that are going to govern your program. Now, role sorting, it's an important aspect of your policy development process. And it really should be conducted in the emergency preparedness phase because you want to engage your internal stakeholders in a non-emergency setting to gain their consensus, their buy-in, and their support with your program approach. And I have personally seen the ramifications in the field when these conversations have not occurred, which has led to assumptions on our capabilities, confusion on who's in charge for conducting a certain activity. And ultimately, this has led to some mistakes that I think could have been avoided with some pre-planning and coordination. And I feel that stakeholder engagement is sometimes missing or lacking in an organization's emergency planning process. So I'll highlight in today's presentation some of the strategies that I use to engage with our various stakeholders in Ventura County. So with that, let's get started with the review of today's topic areas. All right, so we're first going to start off with the interactive portion of today's webinar. I have 2 poll questions that Andrea is going to help me with. We'll give all the participants about 10 seconds to put in their responses, and then I will review those responses with the group. Then we're going to focus on the emergency notification system goals. There's 4 goals that I presented to you last month. I just want to review them. Again, these are goals that you can use or you can modify depending on your environment. And then we're going to look at that the activity of role sorting. There's 3 phases to it, and I'm going to touch upon all 3 phases. And then I'm going to walk you through the new roles and responsibilities template that's now available on the customer portal for all of our customers. And then lastly, I'm going to provide you with a case study specifically focusing on stakeholder engagement and some of the strategies that I use to engage with our internal stakeholders. So we had some buy-in and support with our emergency notification system across the county. All right, so the first poll question, do you have clearly defined emergency notification system program goals? Andrea will launch the first poll question. And again, we'll give you about 10 seconds to put in your responses. Whenever you're ready, Andrea, you can launch the first poll. Okay, there it is. Again, do you have clearly defined emergency notification system program goals? You can put in yes, no, please help, or not sure. And then you hit submit. And again, we'll give about 10 seconds, and then Andrea will end the poll, and then I will review the results with the group. Okay, so it's pretty close. 37% of the participants said they did have goals in place. 30% said they did not, and then 33% said they weren't sure. All right, so that's great because this is what the webinar that we did last month was about policy and goal development. And then the webinar today is all about roles and responsibilities to help you not only with goals, but then on the second poll question, I'm curious to see what the responses are here. So do you have clearly defined emergency notification system roles and responsibilities? Andrea will launch the second poll. And again, we'll give you about 10 seconds to put in your responses. Okay, Andrea, whenever you're ready, you can end the second poll. Great. All right. So the percentages are much better here. 56% said yes, they did have clearly defined roles and responsibilities, which is great to see. 26% said no, please help. So this webinar is going to be even that more important to you. And then there's 19% that said they were unsure. All right, so I want to thank everybody for participating on the interactive portion of the webinar. And so let's now jump into the formal presentation. All right, so I want to start off with talking about the emergency notification system goals. There are 4 goals that I used in Ventura County that have served me well for many years. So I just want to present them to you again for review. The first goal, and I think this is the whole point of having an emergency notification system, is to provide actionable alerts during an emergency that saves lives. Goal number 2 is the planning behind that. So that's the program and planning development so that you have your policy and procedures in place. You have standard operating procedures, you have alerting criteria, you have this roles and responsibilities figured out. All of the planning elements that you need to be successful in your program would be goal number 2. Goal number 3 is focusing on the hardware and the software. This is the actual system that you have employed. You may have one system, you may have multiple systems, but you want to maintain a robust and redundant and effective emergency notification system. And then goal number 4, I feel like this is the one that gets sometimes neglected. It's building those stakeholder relationships. And again, this will be something that I focus in the case study at the end of the presentation today. And then once you have your goals, and if you want to even build out some objectives per the goals, then you could start looking at that policy and governance development. Again, please reference the presentation that we did last month. I presented to you 10 policy questions that you can use to start a dialogue with your internal stakeholders. And these policy questions are going to build a foundation for your planning process and the foundation for your program. All right, so now let's focus on role sorting and what role sorting is and what's this activity that we call role sorting. So again, there's 3 phases to role sorting. The first phase, identifying all of the emergency notification system roles. And I've identified 3 primary roles. You may have less, you may have more, just depends on your organization. But I will review each of the 3 roles with you. The next is identifying the specific tasks, the duties, and the activities associated with each of those roles. And then lastly, we want to assign a responsible entity. This could be an individual, it could be an individual and their position, or it could be the department that is going to be responsible for the role and for the activity that's associated with that role. And so those are the 3 phases of role sorting. Again, this should be conducted in the emergency preparedness phase. So you have a stress-free environment to engage with your internal stakeholders and to identify and put the responsible entity to all of these activities. There's a number of benefits for conducting role sorting. First and foremost, it's identifying those clear lines of authority and those clear lines of communication. And then the byproduct of that is it's going to increase your internal coordination. And this is internal with those departments within your organization. And then also, we can't forget those external stakeholders that you're going to need to help you during an emergency. So think of your local law enforcement, your local fire department, your emergency medical services. These are the folks that are going to be responding to your facility, to your building, to your campus during an emergency. And then from the administrator perspective, you're going to be able to set expectations and you're going to have accountability. Because what's nice about this template is everything is all documented on a form. And so you can use this template to start that dialogue with the teams, and everybody can see the entire scope of your program. And then what's nice is that every responsible entity, they understand what they're doing, and then they understand what your responsibilities are vis-a-vis this program. So it kind of spells everything out. It's all in a document, and then you can collectively come up with the answers to who's responsible for what activity. And then lastly, again, I've seen this in the field, doing role sorting or conducting this activity is meant to prevent assumptions that may occur in the field. It's supposed to limit confusion and supposed to reduce mistakes that may occur during a stressful emergency situation. All right, so what are the three roles? All right, role number one is the administrative role. So this is the program management, and I'll go specifically on what are all the activities associated with each of the roles. The second role is the technical role. This is the management of the hardware and the software of one system or multiple systems. And then we have an emergency response role. These are the folks who are going to activate the system in emergency. And if I can break this down and make this even more simplistic to one word per role, your administrative role is going to manage your program. The technical role is going to implement the system. And then your emergency response role is going to use it in an emergency. So those are your three primary roles. Again, you may have more, you may have less, depending on the size and scope of your organization. Now let's focus on the activities that are associated with each of the roles. We'll start with the administrative role. All right, so first and foremost, you're a project manager. You may have, most likely you have a vendor. So you're managing the vendor relationship. You're the point of contact between your organization and the vendor. So you're overseeing the contract, the purchase order, invoicing, payments, all of the logistical elements that you have with your vendor. You may have one vendor, you may have multiple vendors. And as a project manager, you're also responsible for the timeline, right? So the timeline of the scope of your program, making sure that everything, it has a schedule, and you're making sure that everybody's accountable to the schedule that you have in place for managing your program. Next, you're doing that program development. We mentioned that's the planning aspect of your emergency notification system. First and foremost, making sure that you have plans in place. Then you're reviewing those plans. You're making sure people are aware of the plans, and then you are updating those plans as needed. You're also the system administrator. That means you're the gatekeeper. So who within your organization, which department, which people have access to the system, and what are their roles within the system? So what are their user rights? Also responsible for that stakeholder engagement. Again, first focusing internal, and then also we can't forget that external engagement and relationship building that I feel is essential in being successful during an emergency. Next is developing a training and exercise program. So, and this occurs in every organization, there's always transition and turnover. Those folks who they have a responsibility within your program, then they get promoted or they get transferred to another department. And so there's always some kind of transition occurring within your organization and within your emergency notification system program. Your training and exercise program is supposed to create a level of proficiency. So as new folks come in, you're training everybody to the same standard, the same proficiency, and that you feel confident that during an emergency, that they know what their responsibilities are and what their activities are, and it would be conducted during an emergency. And then lastly, again, developing that timeline and that schedule. And this is referring to system maintenance and system testing. Again, it doesn't mean you're doing it. You're just making sure that that's being followed and that's being conducted on a regular basis. That's the administrative role. I want to shift now and talk about the technical role. I want to outline, because some of our customers, some of the participants on this call might have more than one system. And so there's three primary emergency notification system networks of systems, let's just say. First is that facility-based. So this is the equipment that you will use, let's say hardware or software, that's notifying your recipients in a physical location, whether it's a building or at a facility. So think of, from the Alertus side, that's your alert beacons, desktop notification, voice over IP, cable TV overrides, speakers and horns. This is all the hardware and software that is meant to notify people within a physical location. The next one is outdoor or wide area notification. So think if you're a college campus, for example, you have recipients that are moving between buildings. They may be on a practice field, or there might be some kind of big event occurring at your organization. So they're in these wide areas. And these are systems that are used to notify recipients in open area. So think of your speakers, your horns, and your sirens. And then lastly, we have personal notification systems. This is increasing in popularity, and this is notifying your recipients who are mobile. So cell phone, texting, email, mobile applications via push notification. You may have an internal, external website, and social media is another great avenue to disseminate information to your recipients. All right, so now specifically, what is the technical role responsible for? So they're the primary IT point of contact. If it's an on-premise solution, you have hardware, then there's some kind of server installation and implementation. In charge of system troubleshooting, again, working with the administrative role on the system maintenance and testing, but that maintenance and testing is primarily meant to make sure that everything is running. And then if you have issues, then that technical role is going to oversee the troubleshooting, system configuration and implementation, and then system expansion. So working with the administrative role, identifying gaps in your system. So if you have facility-based notifications, but you're not really strong on a personal notification, your recipients are becoming much more mobile. And so you want to notify those folks as well. So you identify these gaps in your ability to disseminate emergency information. So you want to come up with solutions to buy down those gaps. So this is where the technical role works with the administrative role to bring in those new solutions. And then lastly, the emergency response role. This is your primary decision maker. So when there's an emergency, this is the individual that's going to identify the protective action. We're going to evacuate. We're going to shelter in place. This is the type of messaging that I want to send out to our recipients. So there needs to be an individual, a position that's making decisions. Then we have system activation. Think of your button pushers. This is your dispatchers who are actually going to send out emergency notifications. This role also kind of coordinates the response action. So this is coordinating the response action with your within your organization, and then with those external stakeholders as they come onto your facility, to your campus, that this role is coordinating those interactions and making sure that the response is as successful as it could be. And then lastly, once the incident has been resolved, there needs to be some kind of hot wash or debrief that occurs, and going through some kind of after action review process where you're identifying what occurred during the incident, what went well, what didn't go so well, and how can we improve as an organization moving forward? What are the strategies? What are the solutions we're going to implement now moving forward? All right, so now let's look at the last phase of role sorting, identifying a responsible entity, and I have a couple of examples to show you. If we're focusing on the administrative role, and I'm going to focus on the activity of plan development. This might be assigned to the IT manager or the emergency manager or your facilities or your health and safety officer. Whoever that is in your organization tends to be one individual, one position that's going to serve in that administrative role. And so again, the point of adding a responsible entity is that it's documented somewhere. There are conversations occurring that we are, as an organization, we're agreeing to who's in charge of the overall program, the administrative aspect of it. Now, looking at the technical role, I'm going to focus on configuration. And configuration, we usually give it to the most technical position within an organization, tends to be your IT department, could be the IT manager or the IT analyst, whoever within your organization that's very technical and can do all the configuration and the implementation on your side. And then lastly, looking at the emergency response role, system activation. Here I'm going to assign a little bit more responsible entities. So I'm going to say the emergency manager, the facilities manager, your security operations center manager, and then maybe as a subset, you identify more positions such as your dispatchers. So it might be security operation analysts or staff that you are providing those user rights and training so they can send out emergency notifications. So this is where you're going to build in that redundancy and you're going to add much more responsible parties to that, that last role. All right, so that's the responsible entity. I just want to, again, bring to your attention the customer resources. So if you navigate to help.alertus.com, you'll be at the home page of the customer portal. If you're a customer and you do not have access to the customer portal, if you click on this Alertus technical support, you can request access. So you can email our technical support team. They will confirm that you're a customer. Then they will provide you your credentials to access our customer portal. Everything in the customer portal is free to our customers. There's a wealth of knowledge and information and documentation that's on the customer portal. And everything that I do from a professional services emergency management perspective is on the customer portal. It's a centralized location that I'm putting all the templates. You can access our webinars, articles, all kinds of resources are on this page. So when you are logged into the customer portal, if you navigate to the top, you'll see professional services. You'll click on the emergency management resources, and then you'll get a list of all of the available templates that you can download. And they are they're all in Word document format. So you can download them and then you can customize them to whatever, and you can modify them for your needs and for your environment. And the roles and responsibilities template is now available on the customer portal. I have it broken out into 3 columns. So you'll see first column will be the roles. We have the 3 roles: administrative, technical, and emergency response. The middle column is all of the activities. And what I've done is I've added much more specificity to the activities that I just outlined for you now. So if we're looking at that program development, I'm listing out all of the specific activities that are associated with that title. And then lastly, you'll have a column where you can identify a responsible entity. And this is a great way, again, engaging your internal stakeholders, starting the dialogue, and sitting down collectively in a non-emergency setting and trying to identify who's responsible for what activity. All right, now let's shift and talk about a real-world case study. I like doing this because I want to kind of show you how I handle these types of things when I was an alert and warning coordinator for Ventura County. And just to remind everybody, I've mentioned it in past webinars, Ventura County is the neighboring county to the north of Los Angeles County in Southern California. We have 850,000 residents, so we're Ventura County is a medium-sized county with 10 incorporated cities. In Ventura County, the sheriff is the director of emergency services. And so the emergency management function is delegated to the sheriff, and then he delegates that function to a team of civilians. And I was an emergency manager within the Office of Emergency Services. And as the alert and warning coordinator, I oversaw our VC Alert emergency notification system. All right, so I want to focus for this case study just looking at the administrative role, and again, specifically looking at stakeholder engagement, because I think this is an area that sometimes gets neglected. And so I kind of broke it up into 4 phases on how I went about engaging with our stakeholders. So step 1 was once I came into the role as the alert and warning coordinator, we had just transitioned to a new emergency notification system. So a big part of the role was building out the system and the capabilities. But once that was done, and I felt like we were ready as a group to start engaging with our stakeholders, first step is to identify who are those stakeholders, first and foremost, internally within the sheriff's office, and then looking to our public safety stakeholder, and then, jotting the list down. Next is to educate them and make them aware of the VC Alert program and our alert and warning program, all of the capabilities that we have in place. And then it was a commitment. So after we educated and made them aware, we explained to our stakeholders what are our capabilities and what our commitment will be to them. And then lastly, we responded. So kind of put our money where our mouth is. And then we were with them in the field during their emergency response. All right, so I want to break down those 4 areas in a little bit greater detail. So when we identify the stakeholders, again, we focus first on the sheriff's office. Working with headquarters and working with the leadership team with the sheriff's office, we went and educated our own department first on all of our capabilities. And then because the sheriff's office did contract with some of the cities, we engaged with those captains and commanders at the cities to explain to them as well on what the capabilities are. And then we looked at the county families. So we looked at the fire department, we looked at the emergency medical services, public health, our human services agency, all of those partner agencies that we know we're going to engage with in an emergency. And this identify list, these lists of stakeholders just grew as we became more mature in our program. But this was the initial list that we came up with. And then we looked at the cities. We looked at the city fire departments, the city law enforcement. We looked at the city managers, the administrative and the emergency managers if they had one. And what we did was we created these in small settings. So we wanted to do small meetings with these stakeholders and sit down with them and explain to them what we can do. And so they're fully aware. And that's where the second phase comes in, that education and awareness. So first and foremost, we talked about the VC Alert program, and the program itself grew over time, but primarily it was an emergency notification system to notify any resident within the county. And as we increased our capabilities, for example, we got approved to send out wireless emergency alerts through the integrated public alert and warning system. That's the FEMA system to send out if you ever received an Amber Alert. But those are those notifications to cell phones in a geographic location. We've integrated our emergency alert system. We're able to send national non-weather emergency alerts as well. So we want to just explain to them, these are all the capabilities that we have to alert and warn our residents in an emergency. And then we want to focus on the process and procedure. So we wanted to kind of run through some scenarios and explain to them how this is going to work in an emergency. If they need our office or their city to send out an emergency notification, this is how it's going to occur during an emergency. And then we back that up with integrating them into an exercise and training program. And so whenever we have these trainings and these exercises, we would invite certain stakeholders so they can see how it is. Sometimes they were just observing. Sometimes we just put them into the exercise and we had them request, come up with a scenario and show them how the request would occur, how from the person in the field to making a phone call to our office, to sending out an alert, and then the follow-up that occurs afterwards. So we kind of run them through the full spectrum of how alert and warning was going to occur in Ventura County. And then we did the commitment, right? So part of that meeting was, these are all of our capabilities that we're going to bring to the fight. This is our value add. We talked about our duty officer program. So we had 10, our office had 10 people. Within the 10, 4 of us were duty officers, which means we were on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I was a duty officer, so I was on call for a 7-day period. I had a phone that anybody could call in an emergency, and I was required to answer it during the day, at night, on the weekends, on holidays. If it was my week, I was their point of contact. So just letting them know that there's a program in place, explain them that we have, again, these alert and warning capabilities that we can support you. And then we explain that we can also provide other services such as evacuation coordination, especially if the emergency is going to span multiple jurisdictions. We can come in from the county level and we can help with that support and coordination. So if we have city A and city B, we can be the middleman and we can help with that coordination if we're going to be evacuating residents on both city A jurisdiction and city B jurisdiction. So there's a lot that we can do on the coordination side. Also, if we're going to evacuate, then we're going to set up emergency shelters. And so we can help with working with the American Red Cross. The county has a human services agency. Some cities have a capability to do sheltering. So we would serve as that coordination point to get the sheltering process up and running. And then lastly, we had our Emergency Operations Center. And just one kind of thing about the Emergency Operations Center, it's meant to be there to support and help coordinate field activities. The field is command and control. The Emergency Operations Center is supposed to support and coordinate activities so they're successful in the field. And so we ran through this list and we said, we will be there. This is our commitment to you that we will be there. And then we actually responded to the field. So we just didn't just jot this down and send them via email or on a piece of paper that here's our commitment to you. We actually responded to the field. We responded to day-to-day emergencies. And so our approach was, because they're not familiar with us being in the field, we're not going to go heavy-handed. We're going to respond to the field. We're going to check in with the incident commander, and then we're going to be off to the side initially. We're going to offer up our services. We're going to explain to them what our capabilities are, and then we're going to leave them alone. But we're going to be close enough that when issues come up, and so we're like within earshot, we can hear that there's an issue that the incident commander or unified command is trying to deal with, then we can just come in and say, hey, by the way, we can help you with that. We can help with that evacuation coordination. We can help you with alert and warning. We can help you with sheltering. We can help you with doing animal evacuations. So we would just be off to the side, but we would just be close enough that we could offer that support. And if they didn't want us, if they didn't need our support, then we were there. And it served two purposes. From their perspective, it provided us credentials, right? Like we were there. We're going to be there at 2 a.m, shoulder to shoulder with them in the field. Even though we're civilians, we're going to make that sacrifice and we're going to be with them. So it was kind of showing them that if they call, we will commit, we will be there. And then for us individually, we used it as a training and exercise. If we didn't have an involvement, then this was a training operation. And it was honing in our skills, honing in our standard operating procedures. And so we focus on the small incidents, get the incident commanders from fire and law enforcement used to us being there. And then once we did this, and it wasn't overnight. This took months, this took years to build that relationship, to build the mutual respect and trust. But once it was in place, then we had a major incident. Well, now we weren't just showing up proactively, we were being requested. We were officially being requested from the field because they knew all the capabilities, because that incident commander used us on that smaller incident a couple months ago. So they know what we can bring to the fight. So then we would start getting a call outs more and more, and we'd start being involved much more. And that's how we built success with our program. And really the alert and warning was our foot in the door. We had this huge capability. We can notify, we can help you with those door knocks with actually notifying your residents at their homes, on their mobile phones. We can text them. We can notify open areas. And so that's what we use to get our foot in the door and really show our value add. And then from the Emergency Operations Center perspective, very similar to how we responded in the field, we started to activate our Emergency Operations Center proactively for pre-planned events. And for example, if we knew severe weather was forecasted to occur 12 hours, 24 hours, well, we would activate our Emergency Operations Center. Nothing is going on, there's no emergency, but we'd start coordinating. We would start hosting conference calls. We'd start emailing. We'd start calling executives. We'd call elected officials. We would start getting the entire county on the same page. We would send out situation reports. And so the county saw, wow, okay, the Sheriff's Office Emergency Services is really being very active, and they're giving us a lot of information well before the emergency is occurring. And again, this served two purposes: build that trust throughout the county, and then for us, selfishly, we use them as training exercises and opportunities to bring in new staff, train them on a new position in the Emergency Operations Center, run through our standard operating procedures to send out an emergency notification. So each one of these activations became training and exercise. We honed in our skills. We refined our processes and our procedures. And then when the big incident occurred, well, it wasn't our first time, right? We weren't just activating for an earthquake or a hurricane. We were activating for smaller things, and it just became second nature to us. So that's something I highly recommend to you. Don't be afraid to activate your systems. Don't be afraid to communicate with your stakeholders well in advance. Get involved in pre-planned events. Use those opportunities to train and exercise your organization and your staff. Those are much better than doing a simulation. If you can use a real-world incident to train and exercise, again, if nothing occurs, then nothing occurs. Then I highly recommend that, because speaking from experience, that's how we got really good at our craft. That's how we got really good at responding to the field. It's how we got really good in coordination and communication. And that's how we got really good at activating our emergency operation and doing those activities to support and coordinate with the county. All right, so with that, that's the end of the formal presentation. I want to hand it over to Andrea, who's going to facilitate the question and answer period.
Thank you, Gil. Now let's dive into the discussion and Q&A portion of this session. We highly encourage you to submit any questions and comments that you may have in the chat or in the question box. And it looks actually like we do have one question, and it says, will we be sent the slide deck for the presentation?
Yes, you'll get the slide deck. The session is being recorded, so it's also going to be on the customer portal. We have a section that is for webinars, so it will all be recorded there and available for you to access. So yes, good question.
Perfect. And we have another one in here. I work for a small organization and serve in multiple roles. I'm concerned that if I am not available or on vacation, some of these activities you mentioned won't be accomplished. Do you have any advice or solutions to address this problem?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks, Andrea, for the question. I'm just going to go back to my presentation, and I want to go into this area here. So not all of us have a lot of resources. Totally understand that. In Ventura County, I wasn't resource rich. Again, as the alert and warning coordinator, I served in all three roles. So what you can do with the roles and responsibilities template is you can create a fourth column, and you can create something that says primary responsibility and secondary. So a primary and a secondary. So if you're not available, again, you want to build some kind of redundancy, or you want to train someone else in your organization as a collateral. So we want to cross train. So what happens in that small organization, and we have customers that are small, there's one individual that does multiple hats. When that person's not available, it becomes a single point of failure. And the best way to reduce those single points of failure is to cross train, to build in the redundancy, identify a primary and identify a secondary. And even if you're a big organization, that's a good practice to put into place. And you can even go three deep if you want. So if you want to do a primary, secondary, and then another backup, just in case you have with COVID, we have a lot of staffing shortages. People have to take vacations. We're not robots. People get sick, right? So we want to build in that redundancy, not just with our system, that we have redundancies there, but we have to build in our human redundancies as well. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you for that question.
Absolutely. We do have another one actually lined up. It says, do you see a case where the same activity could be assigned to more than one role? For example, system maintenance and testing is the responsibility of our IT department and would be the technical role.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I didn't mention that in the webinar, but you can definitely, so the activities that I've assigned to the role, you can have the same activity be in multiple categories. For example, the administrative role, I have documented that they're doing system maintenance and testing. Well, maybe the administrative role just oversees that it's being conducted, but really you want to move that activity into the IT, into the technical role and assign it to the IT manager. So the administrative role could have that responsibility, and you can maybe further refine it and say they just have the overall management that's being conducted, but system maintenance and testing is actually a function that's going to be the responsibility of your technical role or your IT department. So feel free that you can have activities aligned in multiple areas. So that's definitely, that's a great question that can definitely occur.
Thanks, Gil. And we actually have one more listed on here. You mentioned in your presentation that you developed 10 policy questions that we can use to build an emergency notification system plan. Where can I get a list of these questions?
That's a great question. It's available on the customer portal. Let me go back here to the customer resource section. If you navigate, once you're in the customer portal and you click on the professional services link and then you hit on the emergency management resources, the emergency notification system policy and governance template is the first template on that list. You can download the Word document and you can access the 10 questions there. I do have a webinar where last month's webinar was all about policy and governance, and I walked through that template. So you have the template, and if you want greater context and you want a little bit more explanation, you can get that detail from the webinar section. So right here, I have the webinar series, and you can click on that and you can see it's webinar number 7, which is laying the foundations for a successful emergency notification system. So that's where you can access it.
Great, thank you again, Gil. It looks like we don't have any more questions listed. So I want to thank you guys all again for joining today's webinar. If you do have any questions or need any additional information, please feel free to email us at events@alertus.com and we will be happy to assist you. If you're looking for more information on Alertus and our solutions, please visit our website at www.alertus.com. Thank you again for joining today's webinar, and we look forward to hosting you again soon. Stay safe and have a great day.
Thank you, everybody.